Today, you and I will look beneath the surface, figuratively and literally, of a land and people whose history continues to fascinate and mystify, inform and intrigue. Above all, endure and connect things present to things past. This is not a matter of decades, even centuries. The people here trace, revere, and recite their ancestry in millennia. A land so vast that if a wall were to be built across it, it would be visible from space. It is. A belief system so deep and complex that the construction of that wall would pale in comparison to the construction of the tomb of the emperor of the time. It does. A history so significant that one emperor would be responsible for two of the great wonders of the world, one above ground, the other below. We will see both. Today, we visit the Imperial tombs of China, many of their national treasures from 7 dynasties spanning over 2,000 years, shared with us in the West for the first time. These are bricks from the Great Wall of China, a wonder of the world over 4,000 miles in length, built as one wall by the first emperor 215 years before Christ, and the only man-made structure on Earth visible from outer space. These come from the last great construction period during the Ming Dynasty, and 3 bear the inscription, manufactured in Jungshou in the 12th year of the Wanli Emperor, or 1584. The first emperor, Jing Shi Huang, of the Qing dynasty, would devote over 10 years and 350,000 men to the construction of the wall in the north to protect against invasion. He would devote 38 years and 750,000 men to the construction of his tomb for his journey into the afterlife. After all, the wall was just for the here and now. His tomb was forever. Let's begin the journey as they did. Here, standing before the emperor's tomb and serving as spirit guardians to the approach, are 2 massive lions, each 9 feet tall and weighing nearly 10 tons. The female, on the left, protects and nurtures a playful cub beneath her left paw. The male on the right protects a giant pearl under his right paw, perhaps a symbol of the globe or of power. Turn now to the entrance to the Valley of the Ming Tombs as we begin our approach down the sacred way. Because they considered nothing more important than their tombs, the emperors would visit them in life as well as in death, formally approaching in elaborate cavalcades, ceremoniously organized just as their funeral procession would later be. You see here bronze figures in a procession, representative of almost 100 like them in the Han Dynasty tomb of a high-ranking commander named Zhang from about 200 AD. The largest of these 2 horses is the mount of the tomb's occupant, approaching the tomb riderless, even as in the tradition of our own modern military. Originally, a horse galloping through the clouds was painted on both sides of the bronze saddle blanket, alluding to the superior breed represented known as Tianma, or celestial horses. The second riderless horse, with its wide-open mouth and raised hoof, represents the cavalry accompanying the occupant. This light carriage was originally hung with bright red fabric, telling us that Zhang was an official above the rank of 2,000 picous. Complete with driver and maidservant, this is the carriage of Zhang's late wife, so that she might accompany him in his eternal journey. We know this mounted emissary with his serious expression was a leader of the honor guard. His mount is large, with raised head and elevated tail, and his large hat is decorated with 2 horns, denoting higher status. These 2 mounted cavalrymen represented the 2 groups that would follow. First, those with halberds, the ancient Chinese weapon combining a dagger and a spear, then cavalrymen with spears. This bronze chariot with an axe bearer tells us something about Zhang. The axe is a ceremonial symbol, letting us all know that Zhang had the authority to put people to death. And this carriage actually had the following inscribed on the breast of the horse: the slave driver, horse, and light carriage of His Excellency Zhang, commander of 1,000 cavalry on the left, and Zhang Ye. The procession ended. We entered the tomb. This one, the tomb of the Marquis Yi, who died in 433 BC, is from the Warring States period. His death predated the unification of China and the first emperor by more than 200 years. Yi was the ruler of the state of Zhong, and the discovery and excavation of his tomb yielded more than 10 tons of bronze artifacts. He probably had no entrance passage like later tombs, but was buried in a gigantic pit walled in by charred wood planks, surrounded by 66 tons of charcoal, under a foot of green clay, 8 feet of packed earth, and a layer of topsoil. The charred timber and charcoal were to filter and purify, protecting the body from harmful elements, real and spiritual. When he died, 21 women, wives and concubines and slaves, were strangled and buried right along with him to keep him company. This is a zunhua, a vessel used to store wine, but this one is the largest ever found, standing over 4 feet tall and weighing over 700 pounds, empty. The 4 rings around the middle are to aid in the substantial task of lifting it. The snake on the side keeps the lid from slinking away after it's removed. Strict regulations governed the use of chimes, and only aristocrats were allowed to use them. Even the size was based on rank. These stone chimes are replicas of the ones broken during the excavation, but the unique frame is original, very original. With 4 feet, wings, a long graceful neck, and the head of a dragon, all decorated with clouds and swirling patterns cast in gold. As we look at these artifacts, the intricate patterns and painstaking detail, the blending of bronze and gold and jade, we should consider the remarkable accomplishment for the time of Marquis Yi's death. Elsewhere in the world, very little of which was known. The Parthenon was just being built. Alexander the Great was yet to be, and Buddha and Socrates were barely gone. Even today, metallurgists remain baffled by some of the techniques employed in the creation of these items. Traditionally, an emperor's tomb would be preceded by courtyards where various rituals would take place. As we move from Yi's tomb into the next gallery, the Hall of the Warring States Bronzes, we might think of it as the first of the courtyards we'll encounter as we tour the Imperial tombs. Many of the things we've seen so far and we'll see here represent food and drink and the accompanying ritual. A hu is a wine container, and a jean is used in ritual ceremonies to display the hu. This hu, with jean, is the only example of a bronze set together. A wading, and its hooks and spoon. Hua for large cooking vessel. Ding for a tripod vessel to cook meat. When this one was discovered in Yi's tomb, it still had a piece of ox bone in it, the bottom blackened by fire and a spoon inside. A ritual meal was cooked and sealed in the tomb. Beyond ritual, the Huading had other, much more frightening associations. An ancient form of execution called for the victim to be hacked to pieces and cooked in a Huading. Look closely at the spoon. In the bowl are 7 white characters, ideographs, the traditional characters of Chinese writing. Unlike the Western alphabet with letters representing sounds, each ideograph expresses an idea or word. This inscription means for the perpetual use of Marquis Yi of Zheng. A shunding. Cook the meat in a huading, but offer it up for sacrifice in a shunding, a more formal ding vessel. A gui. Another ritualistic cooking and serving vessel. This one with clouds, interlaced phoenixes, dragons, bird heads, and more, all originally inlaid in turquoise. An odd number of ding for meat sacrifices, and an even number of gui filled with grain. Heads of state to be buried with exactly 8 gui and 9 ding, just like Marquis Yi. Consider 3 representatives from the animal kingdom as only a ruler of a kingdom would see them, inlaid with gold and silver, a fanciful rhinoceros to serve as a stand for a screen, and here, his companion. Another stand in the form of a ferocious tiger with a hapless fawn caught in its mouth. Between them, a strange creature that was probably the forerunner of the mythical Bichier beast of the later Han Dynasty. The name means driving away evil influences, and the largest of them were placed in front of tombs for just that purpose, from the Han through the Ming dynasties. This bronze basin, rich with imagery and richly green from over 2,000 years of oxidation in the tomb, is called a peg. Coiled serpents form the base, and a column rises from the center of the bowl on the back of a turtle, the dome of heaven, crowned by a hawk, a power of the emperor, grasping a pair of snakes. The turtle and the hawk together represent the emperor's eternal power. 4 more flying hawks hold the rings on the sides. These are standards of a king, almost 4 feet tall, in the shape of the ideograph Shan, mountain. They were excavated from the tomb of King Shou of Songshan, another warring state's ruler. This axe is also from his tomb, and the inscription on it says it all. The Son of Heaven has established the realm, and the Marquis of Zhongshan supports it. This axe was manufactured that his people may respect him. As we consider how much respect to give the king, perhaps we should remember the earlier references to axes and huadings. This masterpiece, one of China's great national treasures, and considered by many to be among the top 5, is the oldest bronze ever discovered using the lost wax process and section mold assembly. It is a zun in the center, a vessel holding wine with a pan under and around it a tray to hold ice or water to cool the wine. The zun was constructed of 34 separate pieces and a pan of 38 pieces, each piece or section fired separately and joined by welding or casting, and then cast from molten bronze. The incredible and delicate detail you see here was carved in wax fixed inside the individual sections of clay molds and left its impression as the bronze melted away the wax. This was achieved 4 centuries before Christ. We will now move from this, our first courtyard, into the second courtyard. From this gallery into the next, the Han and the Tang courtyard, and more, because we will also move from the Warring States period with China divided into the time of the emperors with China united. The time of the Imperial dynasties would last for more than 2,000 years, but wait. You're not allowed to walk through that arch. This is a replica of the entrance to a Ming Dynasty tomb complex, and only the emperor was allowed to pass through the center arch. You and I and other mere mortals would have to pass through the side arches. Notice the brass knobs on the side doors. 9 rows of 9, a lucky number to the emperor. The Forbidden City, for instance, is rumored to have 9,999 rooms. We'll pass through the center arch because the emperor has asked us to join him on a tour of his tomb. Here in this courtyard, we find items from the Han Dynasty, 206 BC to 220 AD, and the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 906. Tricolor glazed ceramic figures, Sansai pottery, are among the most famous Tang Dynasty artifacts. Each figure was covered with lead glaze, and then while the glaze was still hot, various mineral and metallic powders, copper, iron, cobalt, were sprinkled on to create vibrant rivers of color when they melted, still just as vibrant over 1,000 years later. This strange beast with his human face and animal body was placed within the tomb to look just as frightening to evil spirits and grave robbers as he looks to us. On his head are a tall spear and long horns. His topknot is swirled like a conch, and 2 long, bizarre animal ears flare from the sides. Spiked wings sprout from his ribs, and his feet are cloven hooves. He was taken from the tomb of Angpu in Luoyang, the eastern capital of the Tang Dynasty, and that tomb, by the way, was never robbed. he did his job. This magical, mystical tricolor figure, about 4 feet tall with his crown, armor, and raised fist of power and authority, is standing on an ox, representing a vanquished spirit. He is a Buddhist heavenly king, symbolizing unchallenged spiritual power to guard the occupant of the tomb. In contrast, this dignified, serious fellow is very much of this world, representing an official of the Tang court, here in the tomb to make sure all rules and regulations of burial are followed. An ancient civil servant. This magnificent tricolor camel reflects the importance of the Silk Road to the Tang Dynasty, a trade route actually begun in the Han Dynasty. The Silk Road would reach its zenith during Tang reign. Camels were not indigenous to China, but obviously inspired representation in art as vital ships of the desert. From the tricolors, we move to more sedate pottery forms. These are 3 women who are actually all the same. Each represents the ideal woman of the Tang Dynasty, obviously a much rounder and fuller ideal than today's models. Each also represents the same woman in history, upon whom that ideal was based. Lady Yang, first the concubine of Emperor Xuanzong's son, and then favored concubine and imperial consort of the emperor himself. So enchanted with Lady Yang was the emperor that she became a force in government, and that led to her downfall. After an attempted coup by one of her favorites, the people demanded her death, and Xuanzong had to order it. She was strangled by her own guards. Or was she? Another legend has it that Lady Yang had someone else strangled and cremated in her place and escaped to Japan. Either way, the emperor spent every day of the rest of his life openly mourning her loss. A broken man. These earthenware figurines answer the question, what's your sign? With their human bodies and animal heads, they represent a 12-year repeating cycle in which each year, and subsequently your birthday and mine, is represented by an animal, in order: the rat, ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, goat, monkey, chicken, dog, and pig. Although these figurines are Tang, the group of 12 was established by the Warring States period, and their identities were fixed by the Han Dynasty. This large, stately pottery horse with its bobtail and combed mane shows us a mount from China's golden age under the Tang emperors. The capital city of Chang'an was the largest in the world, and diplomatic ties were established with over 300 countries. Contrast that stately style with the fierce determination and rough force of this 5-foot bronze from the Han Dynasty, almost 1,000 years earlier. A celestial horse like the emperor's horse in the cavalcade. These noble steeds were also called horses that sweat blood because of skin parasites that fed on tiny veins just beneath the surface. They were said to be magical, capable of running anywhere in the kingdom and returning within a single day, and capable of speaking any language. This courtyard also reflects daily life in the Han Dynasty. Items buried with the emperor to make him comfortable. In this case, we find an inkstone used in the ancient Chinese art of calligraphy, painting ideographs on scrolls. The cover is carved with long neck dragons, and underneath is a concave surface where compressed pine soot and glue were mixed with water to make ink. On this side of the case, we see 2 bronze mirrors, a flat reflective surface, and an ornate back. This one is inscribed, "May you always be granted descendants," literally a reflection of the singular Chinese reverence for family. This is a model of an enclosed courtyard home popular among the common people of the Han Dynasty. Confucius condemned the practice of killing servants to be buried with their masters, and taught that models to represent servants and their lifestyle should be used instead. These were called Ming-Chi, believed to embody the spiritual essence of whatever they represented. The first tomb we saw was Marquis Yi's, who died about 50 years after Confucius, and still strangled and buried his servants with him. They must have disagreed about models. This model home shows gate, observation tower, residential quarters, kitchen, outhouse, and pigsty. Here a dog lies inside the gate, opposite of the residential quarters and kitchen. And just to the right, the outhouse with a pig in the pigsty below. When it was excavated, models of a stir-fry pan, basin, and other cooking equipment were also discovered. Now we've prepared to leave this gallery, the second of our courtyards, and enter the next gallery, the Pavilion of Treasured Objects. Before we enter the pavilion, again inspired by tombs of the Ming Dynasty, note the bright red walls and yellow tiled roof. Yellow was a color reserved exclusively for the emperor. Red was also popular with the emperors. The walls of the Forbidden City itself were bright red and kept that way for centuries by painting them with pig's blood. Look here, in the corners of the roof. Each has a procession of silhouettes. The emperor on horseback, followed by 9 guardian animals. Again, the emperor's lucky number 9. Treasured indeed is the first object we consider after we pass through the pavilion gate. This is the breathtaking dragon and phoenix crown of the Empress Xiaojing, empress to the 13th ruler of the Ming Dynasty, Emperor Wanli. Never an empress in life, only in death. In life she was Lady Gong, a concubine, not even a favorite. And when she died, she was buried separately from the emperor, since only empresses could be buried in Ming imperial tombs. As we gaze at this incredible piece, at its body inlaid with rubies and sapphires, 95 precious stones in all, consider the story of court intrigue, perhaps even imperial murder, that put this crown on her head. Wanli's empress in life bore him no sons, but his concubines did, including his eldest son by the Lady Gong, Shanghua, who took the throne at Wanli's death. In just days, he died mysteriously, quite possibly at the poisonous hands of another concubine jealous for her own son, but to no avail. Shanghua's son became the 15th emperor, had his grandmother exhumed, named Dowager Empress Xiaojing, and buried in the imperial tomb with his grandfather. And he crowned her for all eternity with this, a Chinese national treasure outside of China, for the first time. The frame is constructed of thin lacquered bamboo strips. In addition to the stones and over 2,000 pearls, the body is embellished with clouds and an applique of lacquered kingfisher feathers, as brilliant blue today as the day the Empress was entombed with it almost 400 years ago. On the front, left, and right of the crown are 3 dragons in filigree gold wire, symbolizing the emperor, each holding a strand of pearls in its mouth. On the front are 2 birds, phoenixes symbolizing the empress. On both the left and right sides are 3 side pieces, each engraved with dragons, phoenixes, clouds, and flowers, and embellished with kingfisher feathers. As we look about this room, we see beams, columns, and latticework walls inspired by the Hall of Heavenly Favors from tomb of the Wanli, the home of the crown. But the treasures here aren't limited to his dynasty. For instance, this covered bowl and slotted spoon go all the way back to the tomb of Marquis Yi of Zheng. The set is solid gold and weighs almost 5 pounds, the heaviest gold object ever excavated from a Chinese tomb. Also from Marquis Yi's tomb is this dragon and phoenix jade belt in 16 sections, found draped across the lower jaw of the Marquis, indicating it might have been a hat decoration, the hat long since turned to dust. As we look at the jade ornaments in this case, all from his tomb, perhaps we're looking at the origins of the traditional Chinese saying that one can recognize an aristocrat in passing by the tinkling sound of jade ornaments. This case takes us forward from the Warring States period to the Tang Dynasty and possibly back as well to the death of Buddha. This is a silver censer used to burn incense, creating a pleasant, uplifting fragrance in the absence of perfume in ancient China and raising prayers to heaven. Allowing the fragrance and smoke to escape, the cover and the lid contain pierced cloud designs in the Rui motif, which means, may your wishes come true. And here may be Buddha himself, a four-piece reliquary. First, a large gilt bronze box. Inside that, the silver outer coffin. Inside that, the gold inner coffin is studded with pearls, turquoise, quartz, and other materials. And finally, the glass reliquary bottle, a white translucent long neck vial containing 13 grains shaped like kernels of rice with the consistency of pearls and drilled with tiny holes, believed to be the relic of Buddha. According to tradition, after the Buddha died, his body was cremated and the pieces left. The relics, a sarai, were believed to have mystical powers, producing brilliant light and divine effects. They were gathered, divided, and distributed across the Buddhist world. This vial, according to legend, contains one of those holy relics, one of 30 distributed to prefectures across China. The shrine to Buddha is a gilded pagoda atop a carved red stone base representing the sacred mountain of Sumuru. Buddha can be seen inside the top, surrounded by his heavenly warriors or guardians, the Vedas. The front face of the base has more guardians carved in relief. The right face is carved with lions, the left with deer, and the rear with dragons and clouds. The blue and white jars at each of the four corners contain fragrant medicinal herbs. The reclining Buddha in front represents the Mahaparinirvana, or the death of the Buddha. This figure, like the holy relic, was kept in a set of nested coffins. Because of the shape of its top, this vase has been given the name garlic head vase and represents the pinnacle of the art of Chinese porcelain achieved during the Ming Dynasty. Mandarin ducks join egrets, sparrows, and frogs among the willows and lotuses in porcelain. Translucent stoneware produced by firing clay mixed with ground stone at high temperatures. The process had begun by the end of the Tang Dynasty, but the Ming perfected it. Shown here with the vase are several exquisite examples of carved jade, also Ming. An octagonal cup with its coiled dragon handles and tray. A calligraphy brush washer in the shape of a crabapple blossom. The coiled hornless dragons resting on it are just babies, called Shur. They protect humans. The official title of this carved mythical creature is Green Jade Water Holder in the shape of an auspicious animal. Its inauspicious purpose was to pour water through its mouth onto an inkstone for grinding ink. Even a simple square box has a complex landscape engraved on its top. From the pavilion into the burial chamber itself. This one represents a round vault lined with stone. Round representing heaven, square representing earth. The actual imperial burial chamber would be square, like a room in his palace, so that the emperor's paw, the part of his spirit that remains with the body, would feel at home. For his hung, the part of his spirit ascending to heaven, the chamber would be surrounded by a round space and buried under a round mound of earth. The Chinese have long attributed magical properties to jade, and during the Qin and Han dynasties, a jade burial shroud was believed to protect royal remains from decay. This testimony to that belief is the jade shroud of Liu Shui, Prince of Liang, who died in 39 BC during the Western Han dynasty. Sewn together with heavy gold thread, more than 2 pounds of it, the suit was tailored to the prince, consisting of head and face coverings, jacket, sleeves, gloves, pants, and foot coverings. 11 sections in all, 2,007 pieces of jade. The small object next to the hand is a hand grasp in the shape of a pig, a symbol of wealth. The small jade items next to the suit are intended to plug the orifices of the body to further prevent decay. Plugs for the ears and nose, coverings for the eyes. Even the cicada, symbol of rebirth, has a plug for the mouth. It is estimated that it took 10 years to produce a single jade suit. Nothing remains of the prince, but this is one suit that is never going out of style. Beneath this gold mask in death was the Princess of Chang of the Liao dynasty, who died about 1000 AD. The Liao rulers were not native Chinese, but a northern people called Khitans, originally from Mongolia. The mask is worked in semi-repoussé, pushing up the expression of peaceful dignity from the underside. The 33 small holes around the edge were used to attach the mask to the burial shroud, made of solid silver mesh in 7 large pieces to cover the entire body, sewn together over undergarments to complete the shroud. Before we return to the land of the living, we have yet another tomb to visit. A tomb that has yet to be fully excavated, but has already revealed enough to be considered one of the wonders of the world. One of the greatest archaeological discoveries of any time. Discovered in our time by Chinese workers digging a well in a persimmon tree grove in 1974. This photo mural shows us row upon row of the soldiers that protect the tomb of their emperor. The first emperor of Qin, the first emperor of a united China. There's an entire army down there with him. 8,000 full-size terracotta soldiers, chariots, and horses. And they'll be there standing guard in precise, tight military formation for eternity. We will meet some of their leaders. This room represents the pits where the army was found. Note the cut, combed earth of an archaeological site. The entire pit area covers 5.5 acres. The 4 men we see here represent the elite command center of the emperor's army. One with his hands folded commands the rest, and the other 3 have their hands shaped to hold weapons which have decayed and been lost over the millennia. A general, 6'2", with distinctive armor and decorative sash, steadfast, contemplative, Confucian, considering many options and plans. Next to him, also 6'2", the next highest ranking officer with his fish scale armor, and then another lower ranking officer, also a bit lower in height at just under 6 feet. And here is the shortest of them all at about 5'9", the ordinary foot soldier of the emperor's army. His fine detailed hair is combed back and secured with a braid. The height of the soldiers found ranges from 5'6" to 6'2", and every single one of them, thousands upon thousands, has individual facial features and hairstyles. This case holds weapons they would have held. A bronze spearhead with a hexagonal faceted blade and decorated with a cloud pattern. A beautiful bronze sword, still sharp and still gleaming as if new. And these, 10 bronze arrowheads, and the bronze mechanism of a crossbow. The crossbow was a standard weapon in China by the 5th century BC, 1,200 years before its introduction in Europe. This terracotta horse, almost 6 feet in height, might well have been employed to pull the chariot of the general we just met. The horse seems to be straining forward, teeth bared to pull the load. Consider Emperor Qing's army in life as well as death. His dynasty would bring China out of the warring states and unify its government, education, and culture. He would build a Great Wall and a tomb covering over 22 acres. The name China is derived from him. And all of this when his dynasty's rule only lasted 15 years. But he would also conscript 1/10 of the entire population into the army for his projects and spend more than 1/3 of the national treasury on his tomb alone. And he is said to have murdered as many as 50,000 artisans who created his terracotta army in order to protect the secret of its existence and location. In many ways, being in Qing's army was the pits. We'll climb from his tomb now, and with a final salute to his army and a wonder of the world, rejoin the living in the splendor of the living emperor's court. In this case, the court of the last imperial Chinese dynasty, the Qing, ruling from 1644 until 1911. We're invited to join an emperor of the Qing dynasty in his throne room at the Shenyang Palace, his summer residence. Along the way, let's pause to look at this rosewood ceremonial carriage, used to transport an image of Buddha during ceremonial processions. This carriage, and sometimes over 1,000 carriages, would join the Qing emperor when he visited the temple of his ancestors and his own tomb in life, just as we saw the symbolic bronze carriages play a part in the approach to the tomb that began the exhibition. As we turn from the carriage, we find ourselves standing in the real-life example of what the emperors sought to duplicate in the afterlife: the opulent surroundings of an imperial palace throne room. These 16 jade chimes and their beautiful bronze and gold frame would be used for the performance of ritual court music during the Qing dynasty, manufactured in the 54th year of the Kongshi era, 1715. Their shape, number, and purpose haven't changed since the set of chimes we saw in the tomb of the Marquis Yi from over 2,000 years earlier. Next to them, we see a single large jade chime about 3 feet by 2 in its own frame and made in the 26th year of the Changlong era, 1761. There were 12 such chimes, each sounding one of the standard pitches, and only one was displayed during each month. Here is a set of 16 ritual bells in a frame identical to that holding the 12 jade chimes and made some 30 years later. As we move toward the throne itself, consider what would have been worn in this room. Imperial robes in bright satin and silk, intricate embroidered symbolism, abundant sleeves, hems, and myriad stripes of vibrant color. The Qing Emperor Renzong, who ruled from 1796 to 1820, wore this bright yellow satin imperial dragon robe at court. At the end of the 19th century, Dezong, the next to last emperor, wore this blue satin imperial robe. His son would be the last emperor, taking the throne at age 2 in 1908 and fleeing for his life from the Forbidden City at the fall of the imperial dynasties in 1911. This is the apricot yellow Kesi silk robe of an empress of the Changlong era. The dragon symbols of the emperor are there, and if you look closely, also embroidered bats. The Mandarin words for bats and good luck have similar sounds, hence, bats on her gown for good luck. Carved from solid jade and inlaid with gold, this dragon is the imperial seal of the Shunzhi Emperor, 1643 through 1661, and its 2 companion gilded wood boxes, one for the seal and one for the vermilion ink. These jade tablets with their gilded protective boxes are a biography of the Shunzhi Emperor for posterity. Both the seal and the tablets would record the honorific, temple, and posthumous names of the emperor and be stored in the Imperial Ancestral Temple. Both are inscribed in Manchu and Chinese. The Qing rulers, the last dynasty, were not native Chinese, but Manchu, a then alien land to the northeast. They would rule for almost 300 years, adopting and preserving ancient Chinese language, religion, and tradition so as not to alienate the people. We now approach their throne. With our approach flanked on either side by these, the standards of the honor guard, they were displayed in the palace during ceremonial occasions and carried everywhere the emperor held court, sometimes fanned by ostrich and peacock feathers, sometimes shaded by elaborate fanciful silk parasols, always accompanied by his honor guard and standards. Even the most basic of items take on imperial importance and meaning here in the palace. Even a spittoon is intricately carved from wood and covered in red lacquer. Even an item first intended as a combination back scratcher and fly swatter evolves into a white jade scepter fit for the emperor. The throne of an emperor. This one from the Qianlong era, 1735 to 1795. A gold lacquer ensemble in 6 pieces with pierced designs of dragons among clouds. Over 5 feet wide, 6 feet high. The dominant colors are the emperor's gold and yellow. The emperor's symbol, the dragon, playfully climbs the back and sides. And behind that throne, 103 dragons cavort across a 13-foot and more imposing screen, also gold lacquer. Every imperial throne was backed by a screen, and none were larger than this, 7 panels and 14 feet wide. In front, always close to the throne, are a number of the emperor's friends and supporters. Wonderful cloisonné elephants, symbols of peace and prosperity. Cloisonné candle holders in the form of cranes symbolizing eternal life. And these very special friends indeed are called le doigt. Notice their ears shaped like upturned pipes. They miss absolutely nothing that happens at court and help the emperor determine the difference between good and evil rule. Their unusual grinning countenance suggests they do what they do with a sense of humor. 4 feet tall, shaped like pagodas and wrapped in dragons, these incense censers would keep the throne area scented with sandalwood. These, as tall and much wider, would keep it warm by burning coal. For 2,200 years, the person who ruled here was called the Son of Heaven, descended to rule the world so his power was absolute. The words he spoke became jade words from the golden mouth. His edicts were sacred instructions, and if written, comments in vermilion. A decree was an imperial yellow notice. His face was the dragon countenance. Where he lived was the purple forbidden city, and his journeys were imperial progress. Just as clouds of incense covered his throne, clouds of mystery have covered the details of his rule. A rule that produced the most enduring civilization in human history, lasting from 2 centuries BC until the beginning of the 20th century. As China opens the imperial tombs and shares their with us, the clouds blow away, and we all share the light of discovery. As the Chinese emperor put it at the opening of the exhibition, not his treasures, but the treasures of all mankind. The emperors sought to live forever by what they placed around them and left behind them in their tombs. So it seems they have.